Hi everyone, it's Lindsay. Welcome back to another video. Today I want to share with you how to make these really fun melted crayon backgrounds. They're super easy. The first thing you need to do is cover your work surface with something you don't mind being ruined and that is also heat resistant because we're going to be ironing on top of this. I'm using an old towel here. I folded it up so it's a couple layers thick. You're also going to need an iron. I'm using a regular iron. You can use a small iron, a craft iron, whatever you have on hand. Now, to start off with, I'm keeping this super low. Remember, you can always add more heat. You can't take it away though. You also need a good selection of crayons. I have this big bucket that at the end of the school year, I just dump my kids' old crayons in, and this is what we use to make like melted crayons. They have one of those little melters that does the shape like the cars and the rings and that kind of thing. So this is our big box of leftover crayons. You also need a grater. Now this one I have here, I got in a set, but I don't like the way it grates cheese. It's much too small for me and I have a hard time holding it. So I'm going to use this. You can find something very, very similar to that one at like Dollar Tree. You can also find them on Amazon, but they're more expensive on there. I'll leave it linked down below, but check out your local Dollar Tree before you go and spend more money than you have to. Now to start off with, I'm starting with these three colors of crayons and I am working on heavyweight white cardstock. I also have a piece of computer paper behind just to help keep my work surface a little bit cleaner and to get all these little shavings, catch all of those so I don't get them absolutely everywhere. I'll show you an easy way at the end of this video to clean all this up as well. So once you have your background ready to go here, your heavyweight cardstock, make sure your iron is on and you've let it warmed up, and then just start grating your crayons over the paper. Now this is wax, so it's going to want to stick, so you might need to give it a few taps to get it to fall onto your paper. And that's another thing, as you're switching colors, you want to make sure you give it a really good tap before you switch colors. Now at some point, if your paper isn't already off your crayons, you're going to get down and you're going to need to go ahead and remove some of that paper so you can continue to keep grading those crayons over the background. Now when grading these crayons, you can go really heavy-handed and add a ton of color, or you can go very light with the amount of shavings you're putting on. Just remember, you can always add more, but once they're on there, you can't really take them away. Another thing to remember is color combinations when you're doing this. I have a horrible time coming up with color combinations on my own. So what I do is I have a Pinterest board, and I will leave my Pinterest account link down below in the description box. But down there, or over there on Pinterest, I have a board that is solely dedicated to color combinations. And when I struggle coming up with color combinations, I head over there and pick one out that I like. Then I try and find colors, whether it's ink colors or in this case crayon colors, that match those colors. And that way I can kind of coordinate everything without having to rack my brain. And really, I struggle with that. So that's a great help to me. So I'm finishing up with my maroon color here, and once that is done, it's time to go ahead and lay over some parchment paper. This is just going to keep your iron from getting waxy, so you need some sort of covering. If you don't have parchment paper, a sheet of computer paper will do just fine. Just know that's going to take some of the color away from your background. The parchment paper kind of resists that wax, but even then, it still takes on a little bit of color. A wax paper would also work well for this. So once I have those overlaid, I'm going to take my iron and just start ironing over this. Remember, you can take heat away, you can add more heat, you can't take it away. So mine was a little bit too, it wasn't warm enough to go through both the parchment paper and also the computer paper. So I took away the computer paper, then started ironing over that parchment paper, and you can see literally through the parchment paper the wax start to melt, and you end up with this really, really fun and gorgeous background that really you can't replicate any other way. I like to run my finger along the edges to remove any little leftover bits of wax, but there you have it. Super easy background. I love the texture on this one too. It's so much fun. And you can see on this background the colors stay pretty separate. They don't do a whole lot of blending, which is so much fun. Now to finish this card off, I used some stamps from Cracker Box and Susie Stamps. I colored them in with my alcohol markers and fussy cut them out. But I wanted to add a die cut sentiment I needed some grounding for it though. I hate to cover up backgrounds like this, so what I do a lot of times is just take whatever die I want to use behind my sentiment and cut it from vellum. That really allows the background to still show through, but still makes the hugs sentiment the focal point. I die cut that hugs several times and layered it up so it has more of a chipboard effect, and I glued everything onto the background. I went ahead and glued that background onto an A2 top folding card base to completely finish off this card. This is a fun one. I really love the way it turned out, but let's go ahead and move on to the next one. So on each one of these cards, I am using Crayola crayons here. I just feel like they have the best wax in them. You can find cheaper crayons, but just know that sometimes with those, you get kind of a separation from the color pigment and the wax in there. I don't know why, but I've done it a lot with just the melted crayons that I make with my kids. It seems the wax, the pigment, and the wax want to separate from each other. So with Crayola crayons, it really doesn't do that. So if you want to save yourself some headache, spend a few more dollars and get the Crayola ones. They work so much better. Now, another thing is you can get a very, very large pack of crayons. So you have all these different colors that you can use. And here I'm using some of those more harder to find colors. So they're not just your regular red and orange and really bright colors. These are more muted, a little bit more toned down, which I love. You can also find some really great metallic colors. Here I'm using a gold, and when you see the final results of what this gold does, it is such a neat the way it melts down on here is so neat. Now with this one, I started off with very, very, very little wax. You can see here, I went through my entire 3 colors, and I'm going to go ahead and start melting onto this. Now once you have melted with your parchment paper, you don't want to use that same side again. You can fold it or flip it over. Make sure you have something protecting that from your iron though. You don't want to get wax all over your iron. But you don't want to put that same color down on a new background unless you're using the same colors. That color will transfer to your new background, and that wouldn't be great. So I went ahead and melted this down, and then I felt like I just wanted some more color on there. Now, like I said before, you can always add more if you don't feel like you have enough on there, but once it's melted on there, you can't take it away. So I went ahead and heat set the rest of this with my iron, just melted down those little bitty pieces that still needed to be melted down. But it just wasn't enough for me. So I'm going to go ahead and come back in and go through all 3 of my colors and add some more. You can do this as many times as you want and layer this background up as many times as you want. It's going to give you some great texture that way as well. So that's another option you have. Start small and build up those layers. It's not only going to give you those colors and those speckles, but it will also give you some texture along the way as well. So I went through all 3 of my colors again. Then it's time to melt one last time here. I'm going to go ahead and just use my iron. I keep checking this in between just to make sure everything's getting melted down. And that's just so I don't undermelt something, but I also don't want to overmelt this and scald it and burn the wax. Not only is it not going to look pretty, but it's not going to smell great either. So once that was done, there is a look at that background. This one, because I used that metallic gold color, does have some texture to it. And look at that gold. You can see those flecks of glitter that have stuck in the wax still, but add just that tiniest bit of texture as well to the background. I love the way this one turned out. Again, the colors stay pretty separate here. They don't do a whole lot of blending together, which is so much fun. To finish this card off, again, I'm using Cracker Box and Susie stamps here. I love this large rose stamp. It's really great to spread across the backgrounds. I stamped that and I heat embossed it with some gold embossing powder. Then I just fussy cut the top of that to make a little panel down on the bottom. I stamped Get Well Soon, and this card is good to go as well. These make some really quick but really fun backgrounds to add to your cards. Now on to my final background here. I'm going to do a rainbow background. I'm going to go through my Roy G. Biv color scheme here, and I'm starting off with red, going to orange, yellow, green, and so on and so forth. But for this, I'm going to go ahead and grate these onto one layer of cardstock, but I'll be making two backgrounds, which is a great way to get a 2-for-1 with this technique. And as I'm going through all of these different backgrounds, I do want to say that I did these all at once. And in order to do that, I do need to clean off my grater in between each time. Be sure to stick around until the end of this video and I'll show you how I clean that off very, very easily in between my different color schemes. So once I had the color graded onto the first background, I'm going to go ahead and lay a second piece of heavyweight cardstock right over the top of that first one and just kind of line it up as best I can. I'll overlay a piece of computer paper and then start ironing. What's going to happen is that wax is going to start to melt on the first one. And not only will it stay on that first piece of cardstock, but it's also going to transfer onto the top layer as well, which is a really great way to get two backgrounds. You're also adding a thicker layer of cardstock in there, so whereas the first backgrounds really melted down and created sort of blobs, this is a great way to hold those wax pieces in a little bit more of a tighter shape. They're not going to move around as much as it did. Now with this, you might not get all of those wax pieces melted because it is a thicker layer, so I just like to give it a good flick to get any leftover shavings that might be on there off. If you want to, you can come back in and add more heat to spread these out a little bit. But because you're putting the pigment in between two sheets of cardstock, there's not a lot of pigment and wax left over to do a lot of moving around. So you get those smaller little dots, whereas on the first one, you really get them spread out. This is a great way to make some quick confetti backgrounds too. And it's a 2-for-1, which you can't go wrong with. I love making two backgrounds at one time to get the most out of my time. Now to finish these cards off, I went ahead and die cut those backgrounds with the wood grain frame die from Cat Scrappiness. It's one of my favorites to use. I did die cut these and it die cut beautifully and didn't leave any wax on my die. So I just thought I would mention that as well. To finish these cards off, I die cut some little flag banners and stamped Hello Crafty Friends, which is from Crackerbox and Susie Stamps as well. I love that sentiment from the Crackerbox and Susie Stamp shops. It's a fun one. Now, once that was done, that is my projects, but I do have some tips to share with you. So really quickly, I want to go over these. You're bound to get some wax on your iron, and I don't love to leave that on there. So while it's still warm, take it and rub it against your towel or use a paper towel and wipe it down while it's warm, and that wax will fall right off. Another thing, as you're switching up colors, you need to clean off your grater in between. What I found works the best is a stiff bristle brush. And I just run it over that grater and keep a piece of just computer paper or scrap paper, whatever you have on hand underneath. That's going to clean up all those little leftover bits so they don't fall on your new project. Finally, all those little pieces get all over your work surface. Use a pet roller, hair roller, lint roller, whatever you have on hand, even just regular masking tape, and that's going to pick up all those little leftover pieces. And yes, I'm in my pajamas by the time this is done. This was a long one to film. But that is going to do it for me today. I hope you guys enjoyed a look at how to make some of these fun melted crayon backgrounds. If you are interested in any of the supplies, dies, stamps I used today, they're all going to be listed down in the description box below. Thanks for watching, everyone, and happy crafting.